भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। सप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष मुखम करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दं। हरि ओम तत्सत्। हरे कृष्ण। Thank you for joining. We are at the very interesting section, seventh canto, the last subsection of the seventh canto, which is a summary of the Varnashram system. In the 11th chapter, just 11 onwards, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, these are the chapters where this particular section, which is essentially a conversation between Yudhishthir Maharaj and Narada Muni. Just doing a quick recap. After the beautiful pastimes of Prahlad and his perfection, Yudhishthir Maharaj was very interested in understanding about Sanatan Dharma and Varnashram Dharma. And he requested Narad Muni that who can be more capable than you? You are the most perfect. You know everything perfectly about scriptures. So please narrate. So Narad Muni obliges. First, he describes Sanatan Dharma based on what he directly heard from the Supreme Lord, Narayan himself. And that was the early part of the 11th chapter. After that, the subsequent part of the 11th chapter, which we have already covered, the recap, was a summary of the four Varnas. So the Varnashram system has two dimensions, Varna dimension and Ashram dimension. Varna can be described as social classes based on social order, and ashramas can be called as spiritual classes, social, spiritual. Social is linked more to the guna karma that a person is born with. But when I say born with, the born with doesn't mean just because somebody is in a particular family, but born with in the sense that the body that one is born with. Whenever we are born, this particular body mind complex has, based on its past life and the impressions and its evolutions, and based on the particular combo of the modes of maternal nature, the living entity is given a body in a particular modes which is compatible with its nature and evolution, and accordingly is born into a particular varna. A social order. So there are 4 social orders: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and we discussed this in a fair amount of detail. What are their characteristics? What is their nature? What are their professions? We also discussed about emergency duties. We discussed about mixed classes. We discussed about the duties of a chaste woman. Because across all these 4 social orders, the woman's duty more or less is the same. Of course, they may assist their respective husbands to some extent in their professions. As a chaste wife, it is their duty to serve. But the generic duties of a wife across the 4 varnas is more or less the same. And in one line, the duty is to be a chaste wife to the husband. So chastity is defined. So chastity, of course, the absolute minimum hygiene requirement of chastity is to not go to another man, or to not to think of another man other than one's husband. But chastity is not just that, but the duties of a chaste lady is not just remain with the husband and not think of any other man, but also to be always favorable to the husband and serve him and his relatives. So we discussed that as well. So now that the Varna discussion has been more or less completed, of course, we discussed about the mixed Varnas and what that means, what are their professions, what is their situation, the Pratilom and the Anulom, the 2 categories of mixed castes, and what are typically their professions and things like that. So all these things we discussed. Now, in this chapter, which is the 12th chapter, which we are beginning today, the discussion on the 4 ashramas begins. Now, for the varnas, maybe 60-70% of one chapter was adequate. But when it comes to the ashramas, actually 4 chapters are dedicated. So this chapter 12, which we are about to discuss, the chapter 12 focuses on 2 ashramas: Brahmachari ashram and Vanaprastha ashram. They are a bit similar, and we'll discuss how a little later. But interestingly, these 2 are clubbed together. Rather than go in the sequence of discussing Brahmachari, then Grahastha, then Vanaprastha, then Sannyas, Brahmachari and Vanaprastha are discussed together. Very interesting. In fact, even when I was staying in the ashram as a Brahmachari, there were a few Vanaprasthas who were also staying in the same ashram. So that's a hint as to why Brahmacharis and Vanaprastha topic are discussed together. Anyway, we'll come to that in a bit more detail shortly. So Brahmacharis and Grahasthas are discussed in chapter 12. Chapter 13 discusses the ashram of sannyas. That full chapter is all about sannyas and perfection, duties of sannyasis. The following 2 chapters, 14 and 15, discuss Grahasthashram and perfection of life in Grahasthashram. Very interesting. So the topic which is most relevant to us, at least in our current situation, for most of us actually, has been given two distinct elaborate chapters, chapter 14 and chapter 15. But that's not the topic of today's conversation. So there is Varna, then there are ashramas. It's something like a matrix. Why it's a matrix? Because one is about one social order, which typically in 99.99% does not change within the same life. Of course, in theory, and we discussed this earlier also, in theory, one can evolve in the gunas and become either evolve or naturally be born with certain gunas which are a little distinct from their parents. Not a usual scenario, but it is possible. There are a few examples in scriptures for it. We'll not go into that now. It's a very big discussion. Vishwamitra and Parshuram are the best examples of this, but we'll not go into that discussion right now. Generally, Varna doesn't change within the life because it is kind of built into this body deeply. But in theory, yes, one can evolve. We also discussed, and that was at the conclusion of the chapter, it is not absolutely necessary for perfection for each of the varnas to actually come to and become a brahmana first because before they can achieve perfection. No. Krishna did not tell Arjun, you do sadhana until you become a Brahman. And after that only you can achieve perfection. Whatever is your duty, your duty is fighting, you fight for me. Mama anusmara yudhyacha. Mayyarpita manobuddhi mame vaishyasya samshaya. If your mind and intelligence are offered to me, Arjun, you will attain me without fail. And that is the guiding principle for spiritual perfection for all varnas. It is not that the Kshatriya, Vaishya, and the Shudra has to be frustrated. I am born in this particular varna. Born in the sense, this is my natural constitution, but now I have to try very hard to become like this. No. Swadharma Shreya Viguna. Even if there is a fault in one's Swadharma, even then, following one's Swadharma is better than copying another person's Dharma. Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita. Paradharma bhayavaha. Fearful. Sometimes devotees get too caught up. Oh, I have to, act and become like a Brahmana. Everyone should. The formula that Krishna has given, the Bhagavad Gita is, act according to your nature, dedicate your activities to the Supreme Lord. Initially, if you cannot dedicate the activities directly according to your nature, at least dedicate the fruits of your activities initially and eventually dedicate the activity itself. And in that way, if you perform your profession, you can achieve perfection in this life, no matter which varna you are from. So that's a very, very essential and important understanding. The previous chapter actually concludes with the point that one's varna is not determined simply by birth. The birth hints at a varna as a very, very likely varna. Because generally, if the husband and wife are both brahmanas, it's very likely that the soul that will come into that body, which is produced from a Brahman and Brahmani, will be of the mode suitable for a Brahman inclined soul to come and inhabit. So that is logical. Correct? But scripturally, there is no restriction. There are scenarios where a soul may come and certain kinds of situations may give rise to a body which is different qualitatively than their parents. And in such cases, based on the actual nature that the living entity displays, guna and karma, chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagashah. One's varna is determined, not simply based on birth. So this is a very, very important principle. So all that whole discussion happened in the 11th chapter. So 12th chapter is the beginning of the 4 spiritual classes. What are the 4 spiritual classes? The Vedic Varnashram system give a general outline of what are the predominant, if you take life, what are the predominant stages that a progressive, spiritually evolving soul, because anyone who's within the Varnashram system is expected to be progressive spiritually. That a progressive spiritual soul is supposed to follow so that he can progress towards the goal of life. Of course, there's a possibility he may attain the goal of life, but at least even if he doesn't, if he follows the system, at least if he's on 20%, maybe at the end of his life, he's 25%. Next life, he'll start from 25, 30, so on and so forth. At least there is progress. Arya. Prabhupada would often say Arya is not a race, like what Hitler would say, Aryan race, we belong to the Aryan race. Krishna told Arjuna, don't be anaryan, anaryajishtam, aswargam, akirtikaram Arjuna. Do not be anarya, do not be a non-Arya. What is an Arya? Arya, sometimes in very simple words, is translated as noble. Yeah, but what does this nobility mean? Prabhupada defines it very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita purports. He says, Arya means who knows the progressive value of the human form of life. In Varnashram Dharma, everyone knew we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. The Brahmana knows, of course, in great detail and with scriptural references. The Kshatriya also knows. The Vaishya also knows. Even the Shudra knows. Even the Shudra knows that I am a soul and I have got this body because of my previous karma. So everyone, the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, except for the outcasts are not interested in the goal of life. Correct? The Yavanas, the Chandalas and others. What is their philosophy? Yavat jive sukham jivet rinam kritva ghritam pibet. Charvak philosophy. Who has seen whether there is soul, whether there is God? The sum and substance of life is enjoy. Even if you have to steal, beg, borrow, steal, enjoy. Who has seen? Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam bhavet. They say like that, who knows? Why take risk? Zindagi na milegi dobara. This is the slogan of the demoniac people. This is the one and only life I must enjoy. So this is called anarya. Don't waste my time. You don't even know what. You are as good as animal. So we are not even discussing about that category here. We're talking about the Arya. In previous ages, the Shudras in the previous ages are better than the most of the Brahmanas of today's time. Anyway, I will not go into that detailed analysis right now. But being a first class Shudra, it's a good deal. So everyone is progressive. And within each Varna, there's a certain expectation within one's life. One is progressive towards the goal of life, and that progression broadly is classified into 4 stages of life progressively: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. As life progresses. So, in a very simple way, Prabhupada says, first 25 years, Brahmachari. Before we get into detail, I just want to give you an overview. The Bhagavatam doesn't give that overview. I'm just giving so that you have the bigger picture in mind. You understand. Spiritual orders. Within each of the Varnas, there are spiritual orders. Starts with being a student. Not just simply a student in Yale or Harvard or Stanford or University Malaya or whatever. Being a student under a bona fide spiritual master. Studying the Vedas. Studying both spiritual knowledge and material knowledge. Brahmachari. First 25. So the Vedas generally say, Shatayur Vai Purushaha. Human life is around 100 years. Because last 100, 150 years, for various reasons, or maybe over the last 200 years, the average life expectancy has come down. But for thousands of years, 100 was very easy to achieve. Nowadays, we hear somebody has lived 100. His Holiness Radhanath Swami, his father lived up to 100. There are so many who have lived up to 100. Because now it is rare. But Shatayur Vai Purusha, the general expectation is 100 years. So that 100 years are divided into 4 stages. 4 spiritual classes based on 4 stages. Brahmachari, first 25 years. Grihastha for the next 25 years. Vanaprastha for the 50 to 75. So many times across the Bhagavatam says, when you're coming close to 50, you should plan retirement. So, anyway, modern man doesn't like that statement so much. He says, my company allows me to work until 60. I will work until 60. And then even after 60, I will do this, that. Anyway, I'm not criticizing this. There may be various considerations. But I'm telling what is the standard expectation. The closer we come to it, the better. From birth to 25, Brahmachari, 25 to 50, Grihastha, 25 years. Within 25 years, your marriage, your children growing up, and your children getting married. Ideally. So that you are free for Vanaprastha. Done. And then, nowadays, people get married only around 30. Then they are so busy in their career, they start having children around 35. Maybe not so much for our generation, but I'm talking about a little younger generation. That has now become the trend. Fortunately, we were not caught up, most of us. I got married 26, so almost there. And my first son, 27, 28. I'll be 50 in another 1 month's time. Yeah, so now I am in wind down mode. So I'm preparing for my Vanaprastha. Anyway, we'll discuss what Vanaprastha means in today's time. That requires a bit more elaborate discussion. But right now, our focus is on what Narad Muni is telling. We'll try to also discuss a little bit what it means in today's time. It's not hurry. So 25 years Grihastha, ideally 50 years Vanaprastha, 50 to 75 Vanaprastha, generally, not so much fixed, but one doesn't have to remain in Vanaprastha for 25 years. Actually, if one can take sannyas sooner, even better. Huh? But Vanaprastha followed by sannyas. So, just for a simple consideration, 75, what you want to do after 75? You should be fully absorbed in the Lord. Don't think about anything. Actually, Vanaprastha already you should almost stop thinking, but sannyas means zero thinking about anything else. Don't be babysitters for your grandchildren. So that's the high level thinking. The high level thinking is first 25 years building of characters, building of skills. Brahmacharya ashram. Then the grahast ashram is where one is given the chance. Huh? Artha, dharma, kama. You have already learned. You learned the principles of artha, dharma, kama in brahmacharya ashram, but you will exhibit your dharma when you get married with your saha dharmacharini, your wife. The husband wife together, they execute dharma, they do their duties like what has been mentioned according to their varna, right? Husband and the wife together will perform their occupational duties and their religious duties and spiritual duties. Occupational duties, religious duties, spiritual duties. So that 25 years, 25 to 50 is the time that the conditioned soul who is in his uh, who has that energy for material attainment according to his dharma, according to his guna and following the principles of dharma to try to enjoy the world in a befitting way. There is a disease. What is the disease? Disease is to enjoy independent of the Lord. But if one adopts the system of varnashram and follows and exhibits his dharma, artha, and kama. Artha means acquiring of wealth. Kama means according to dharma, enjoy the fruits of one's activities. Why? Because one still has material tendencies. The expectation is when one earns artha through dharma and then uses that artha to do kama or to enjoy in a dharmic way, then gradually detachment will come. So by the time one comes to 50, one is not thinking of starting a new startup and develop a unicorn and become a billionaire. That happens when one doesn't develop because one is not purified enough by following the system. One is thinking about more and still thinking about grandiose plans, how to enjoy more in the material world, how to accomplish more in the material world. The thinking should be, oh, I have experienced enough. I may not have been the most successful in life, but I have experienced enough to get the realization that true happiness doesn't lie in this. This is a sham. This is an illusion. Of course, Brahmanas get a much deeper realization of this because they're in the mode of goodness. Kshatriya somewhat, Vaishya struggle a bit. Shudras generally don't get so much. But that's the idea. That one should be done. One should become a bit indifferent towards materialistic life. And then after 50, one is one gets into Vanaprastha, Prabhupada says Vanaprastha is nothing but a preparation for sannyas. Why one needs to prepare? Last 25 years you have been enjoying with wife, children, money, wealth, everything. Just get up and renounce everything and, dedicate fully to the Supreme Lord. No, you have to undo and become detached. You have to do austerities, you have to do purification, you have to come to the point. Increase your jnana and vairagya and bhakti. Of course, in the bhakti context, when we speak about jnana, we are talking about Bhagavad Tattva jnana. We are not talking about jnana of the impersonalist jnana. It means we have to develop more deeper understanding of Shastras, especially the Bhakti Shastras. And increase one's detachment, perform austerities, do more charity, do more austerities. Krishna says, no, yajna dana tapa should never be given up, even by the purified. Correct? So one becomes sufficiently purified, and as soon as one reaches the right level of purification where one can be 100% dedicated to the Lord, that is the beginning of sannyas. Prabhupada says often, sannyas is not just about wearing saffron and holding a danda. That anybody can do, that actors can also do. Is that so difficult? Is it difficult to act like a sannyasi externally? No. Maybe there are certain actors who can act better as sannyasis than real sannyasis. And that's why Krishna says, just because you are skilled at doing another's duty better, don't do it. Unless you have the internal qualities and purification necessary to actually perform those duties. That is the meaning. Otherwise, your life will be a big flop. External, internal must be aligned. Part of the yoga process is about alignment. And one of the alignment is one acts according to what one is. It doesn't mean that if one is sinful, one acts in a sinful way, but one knows based on one's situation what is the kind of dharma he is eligible for. And one follows that and tries to dedicate it to the Lord. That is the understanding. So, one is expected in the human form of life to, by the end of his life, hopefully he has some time to remain in sannyas, not that he takes sannyas and dies immediately. So, the last portion of his life, if he lives long enough to be 100, then from 75 to 100, and is fully dedicated to the Lord. One burns away all one's karma, all one's attachment, and at the end of the life, one is focused on the Supreme and attains the Supreme abode. That is successful life according to Varnashram Dharma. That is success. The perfect success is one goes through these 4 stages and perfects one's life. So it's a very scientifically designed system. So these 4 classes, which are going to be covered across 4 chapters. The first chapter covers 2, Brahmachari and Vanaprastha. The next chapter covers Sannyas, and the last 2 chapters cover Grihastha and their duties in detail. Ideally, one has to go through these 4 classes. That is the standard template that has been given to humanity by the Supreme Lord. The simple definition of Varnashram, as given in the Bhagavatam and many other scriptures, is based on one's nature to perform one's prescribed duties in such a way with the intention of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari Toshana. Swanushthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir Hari Toshana. Correct? Second chapter of the first canto. Very beautiful verse. Samsiddhir Hari Toshana. Hari Toshana means satisfaction. The perfection of the performance of duty of all the varnas and ashramas is to please the Supreme Lord. And how is the Supreme Lord pleased? When one acts according to the prescribed duties, according to one's Varna and Ashram intersection, whichever square one is lying on, and does it in such a way that one dedicates the activities and the fruits to the Lord for his pleasure, then one is on the Arya path of life, progressive path of life towards the supreme perfection. I hope you get the idea. I'm still giving you a bigger picture, because if I get into just telling you, oh, brahmachari means this, if I just give you a checklist, you will lose sight of the concept. The concept is not explained here. I am explaining to you based on 30 plus years of hearing and discussing this topic. So you get that appreciation of the bigger picture. Details are easy. You can look up anytime. Ideally, one would like all the four varnas to go through the four ashramas, isn't it? Everyone goes through brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasa. But that actually doesn't happen, because it's not easy for everyone. It's easy for everyone to get married. It's not easy for everyone, even to be brahmachari. What to take of sannyas? Huh? Even amongst the four varnas, not everyone. Huh? Only the dvijas go to brahmacharya ashram. Who are the dvijas? Huh? The Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Brahmanas. Only they go to the. Only they are given the Gayatri mantra. They go to the Guru. They are trained in scripture and then also given skills. Of course, this is not because of any discrimination. Again, this is not based on birth. This is simply based on their qualities, they can live the kind of regulated life that is needed for Vedic study. They will have the necessary minimum qualification to enter the Vedic school in terms of studying the Vedas. Of course, the Shudras are still part of the Varnashram system. The Shudras typically do not study the Vedas directly. And you can figure out why, right? Kalau Shudra Sambhavi. Kaliyuga, everyone is a Shudra. Janmana Ajayate Shudra. So who is learning the Vedas? Even whoever is sitting here, even those who are from Brahman background, how many of us have studied the Vedas? How many? And before we came to ISKCON, we didn't even know the name of the four Vedas. Forget about knowing what is in it. So it's a messed up thing. Sometimes people wonder, Prabhu, why are we even discussing this topic? If this is so far away from us, no. We may not be able to go to the Varnashram the way it was thousands of years ago. And that's not even our immediate attempt. We want to understand the framework and the concept, because those principles are true at all time, all places, in all situations. If we understand those principles, they will help us to progress. What are those principles? Whatever I've been speaking for the last 40 minutes. Huh? Understand our nature, do duties according to our nature, dedicate those for the Lord, and in life be progressive towards the ultimate goal. Learn, practice, detach, perfect. Correct? Learn, brahmachari, practice, grahastha, detach, vanaprastha, and perfect. Sannyas. Perfect means sannyas means samyak nyas. Samyak means complete. Nyas means complete cessation of material activity, fully absorbed only in transcendental activity. Samyak nyas. Okay, I mean that's the broad idea. So coming back, we have the four spiritual classes: brahmachari, ashram, apart from the Shudra, the Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Brahmana. All three go to the Guru. All three get the Gayatri Mantra. All three get the thread. all go to the Guru's ashram, but based on their varna, to different degrees they study scriptures. The Brahmana is taught very detailed because he's taught to learn spiritual knowledge in greater detail and also the various Paurohitya that he's supposed to do, the yajnas, the ceremonies, and all that. Kshatriya to slightly lesser extent, and Vaishya just little bit preliminary, intermediate, expert in Vedic scriptural knowledge and ritualistic knowledge. In fact, the Vaishya is not even allowed, we discussed this last time, to directly perform. Sometimes even the Kshatriya knows enough to perform the yajna himself, even though generally it is best to engage a Brahmana, especially for complex ceremonies. Shudra is nowhere qualified to participate in the yajna. He can just sit behind and do swaha, take the grains and put into the fire from a distance. They don't even recite the mantras. They can only Grihastha. So first is Brahmachari ashram. Brahmachari who is qualified? Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana. Grihastha. Everyone puts their hands up. I want to marry. I want to marry. Everyone wants to marry. Okay, Baba. I'll get married. That is the only way you will learn. Materialistic life is miserable. Come, everyone come and suffer and be beaten for next 25 years until you realize that this wasn't as much fun. Correct? Of course, those times there was no TV and movies. This time, people hear love songs since they are 4 years, 5 years, grow up seeing romantic movies. They think this is the perfection of life. Having a beautiful girl or a boy, having a lot of money, driving wonderful cars, touring the world. Wow, this is life. Achieving great success. But when they actually go through the rigor of life, they get so beaten up badly that if they are following a dharmic path, otherwise they'll not even realize. If they're following a dharmic path, they'll realize that for so much happiness, I took so much trouble. And that realization is expected to be very solid by 50 years of age. One becomes vriddha. You heard the word vriddha? Anyone knows in Hindi, Sanskrit, what does the word vriddha mean?
Bujurg, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Any other translation of the word vriddha? So generally, in common parlance, an old person is known as a vriddha. But the actual meaning of the word vriddha comes from the word vriddhi, means increase. Increase of what? Not just of age, but increase of wisdom, increase of experience, increase of realization. If one is simply growing in age but not developing in wisdom, then that's not really a vriddha. If a 50-year-old man is behaving like a teenager, he's walking on the street also, he sees some beautiful girl going around, he's also looking at them here and there like a teenager is looking. What have you realized in life? You are still struggling because you are not properly followed your dharma. You are still struggling to get any substantial realization. So vriddha means experience. So one is expected by the time one reaches around 50 years of age that one is mature in wisdom, so that one is then determined that this is not the goal of life. The goal of life and the happiness is something beyond, and for that I have to renounce this and go forward. So grahastha everyone does. So after brahmacharya ashram, Vaishya, Kshatriya and Brahmana get married. Shudra is just waiting to get married. He is no ashram, nothing. He is just They may learn some skills, but they are not actually properly in any Vedic knowledge and life training. That's why Kalau Shudra Sambhava. Like just going to academic schools, learning some uh, mundane knowledge, some little skills, and then getting married. So that's the Shudra mentality. No brahmachari ashram. Huh? What is brahmachari? Brahmacharati iti brahmachari. One who is practicing, taught to how to practice spiritual truth is a brahmachari. How to live in spiritual truth. So brahmachari, the upper three ashrams, the dvijas, grahastha, all four. Vanaprastha, generally, now there are different opinions, but generally, Kshatriya and Brahmanas take Vanaprastha. Vaishya actually generally struggles. Vaishya is generally too attached because Vaishya is a mixture of Tamogun and Rajogun. Right? Brahmana is Sattva. Kshatriya is a mixture of Sattva and Rajas. Vaishya is a mixture of Rajas and Tamas. And Shudra is predominantly in Tamogun. Vaishya is too difficult. Take. But they may say, okay, I will do donation. But don't ask me to become detached. I want to continue to play with my grandchildren and be here and tell stories. And that's why kings you will see taking Vanaprastha. So many in the examples in the scriptures, isn't it? So many kings going to Vanaprastha. And around 50, once their children are grown up, they want to give the king. They have come to the Vriddha state of experience and maturity. I want to quickly hand over my kingdom and go to the forest. I have little time left, 50 already gone. I don't know how many years more I have. Let me focus on that which is of value. Isn't it? Huh? The Pandavas did that. Huh? Lord Ramchandra gave that example. Huh? What to speak of others, even at one, even eventually, after so much banging on the head, Dhritarashtra also set that example. What to speak of others. So this you'll see as a common theme across, at least the Puranas. I'm not talking about modern times. Modern times very hard to find. So Kshatriyas and Brahmanas, very strong expectation. You have to take Vanaprastha. But sannyas, so much purification that one can become 100% dedicated to the Supreme Lord is not such an easy thing. Generally, at least on theory, Brahmanas were more often than not able to take sannyas. Even though sannyas is not forbidden for the Kshatriyas, generally it is the Brahmanas who go through all the four or are expected to go through all the four: Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. Kshatriya, Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha. If really very exalted, Raj Rishi, then can take sannyas. But not a very common phenomenon. Vaishyas, Brahmachari, Grahastha, very few will take Vanaprastha. Not forbidden, but not a very common phenomenon. Shudras, Grahastha, 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 die. Huh? No brahmachari ashram. So they are children, they are studying, but they are not called brahmachari because brahmachari means you are the first verse that we are about to discuss. Only 8 minutes remaining. Brahmachari Gurukule Vasan Vasadantam Gurur Hitam. Brahmachari means not in studying in Yale or Wharton or Stanford or IIT or whatever. Brahmachari means he who stays in the home of the spiritual master and serves him and learns spiritual wisdom. Okay, so I I took this 52-minute introduction so that you get an overview, not just for this chapter, but for the next 4 chapters, because I'm not going to be repeating this. Because we'll be jumping now into the details of Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, and Grahastha in that order, because it is explained like that here. So first 2, which are covered in this chapter, are Brahmachari, and I will cover them in 7 minutes. This chapter. I've just started the chapter, but I can, because neither you nor I are going to, of course, I was fortunate to be in the Brahmacharya ashram for some time, but at least here, no point going to too detailed discussion. When any of you want to become Vanaprastha, we can discuss. But if you look at the Vanaprastha standards which are mentioned in the Bhagavatam, you'll run away. You'll never become Vanaprastha. So don't worry. You don't need to read too much into this right now, because our application of Vanaprastha in today's time is going to be a bit different. First of all, there is no one only to go to. There is no forest remaining to go to. There is no ashramas in the forest that one can go to. Even Vrindavan, at least to the external eyes, is no longer a one. Barely you see forests. So much overdevelopment, even in Vrindavan. Very difficult to find any forest and like the olden time. Kunjas and the Bana. That situation. Anyway. So let us discuss, at least let us cover Brahmacharya. I don't know whether we'll cover Vanaprastha. So the duties of the Brahmachari is what Narad Muni first starts with. And he gives this verse first. It's a very, Prabhupada quotes this verse often across his various purposes. Brahmachari Guru Kule Vasandanto Gurur Hitam. Acharan Dasavan Nicho Gurau Sudruda Saurudha. In simple words, it means, it defines a Brahmachari. The Brahmachari lives in the ashram of the Guru and does what? It is not a lodging boarding place simply. It is not simply a hostel run by the Guru in return for some rental. No. He stays there practicing Danta. Danta means sense control. And his only, if you define his duty, his only one duty when he's in the ashram of the Guru is to serve the Guru. Gurur Hitam. Serve the Guru. How to serve the Guru? Dasavan and Nicho. Very humbly, like a servant, menial servant. Brahmachari means menial servant of Guru. Very simple. It says wash pots, wash pots. It says come and study scriptures, come and study scripture. Whatever, Guru will decide what you will learn, because Guru is observing. Why is Guru observing? Oh, you are son of Brahmana, father and mother. Are you actually displaying the qualities of Brahman? Should I teach you the Vedas? Or should I put into a different class, another batch, another cohort? Nowadays they like the word cohort, where the Kshatriyas are being trained. So the Guru observes very closely. What is the nature? And he will train them accordingly, guide them accordingly. So, in a very humble way, one serves the Guru. The disciple is trained by the Guru to live a life of sense-controlled regulation, where one is focused on study, service to Guru. That's all. And service to Guru includes doing all the ashram duties, including sometimes going to the forest, bringing firewood, begging alms on behalf of the Guru. Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi. In the forest, sometimes you'll go to the nearby village. For my Guru, I'm begging. Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi. And then take all that, not eat. Take it to the Guru, give all to the Guru. And then the Shastra says, a Brahmachari will come and study when the Guru calls him to study. He will come for lunch or meals when the Guru calls him. If the Guru doesn't call the Brahmachari, he doesn't even have lunch, he fasts. That is the kind of discipline expected. He doesn't come to the Guru and say, did you forget something today, Guru Maharaj? Did you forget something? If he doesn't call him, he doesn't come for lunch. And the guru here, we're not talking about sannyasi. In olden times, most of these gurus were rishis. They were very experienced brahmanas. Most of them were grihasthas because they would take care and train so many young children. The children would come to the ashram around the age of 7. After their Upanayan is done, they go to the ashram of the guru from 7 to 25. So all young children of all ages. The younger ones also need motherly care when their mother is not around. So the guru patni performs that role. Throughout the day, they are studying or they are serving. And all throughout, strictly under the control and guidance of the Guru. Guru's word, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Koriya Aikya. So they are trained in a disciplined, sense-controlled life from the very early childhood. Prabhupada says this is so important. Only if you are controlled, you are trained to live a controlled life and instilled with the right values in Brahmacharya ashram, then you can expect to have a controlled life in Grihastha ashram. Otherwise, what can you expect? Because in the impressionable age, if one has not been instilled with the right values and training, what can one expect when one is in the heat of the material world with full exposure? There is in the forest. There is no cable TV, there is no internet, at least in those days. Nowadays, ashrams also have. Of course, even though they have, they're expected to use it only for spiritual purposes, but whether that actually happens is a question mark. How does a brahmachari dress? The Bhagavatam says, typically in a deer skin, with a belt made of kusha grass around his waist, has a brahmachari danda, and sometimes a water pot. And they also carry a kusha grass for purification. If you want to see how a brahmachari looks, just imagine of the typical form that you see Vamana Devin. Vaman Dev is an example of a wonderful brahmachari, Supreme Lord. Vaman is a brahmachari. Batu is Batu. So if you remember that picture, he's wearing a deer skin and having a rod, a kamandalu. That is a brahmachari's dress. But you say, Prabhu, deer skin, how to wear leather? So they would not go around killing deer for wearing deer skin. So in ancient times, there were far more animals than humans. And humans would, especially within our Vedic culture, when animals would die, then their skin would be used. So that was common. So morning and evening, the brahmachari goes out, collect alms and gives it to the Guru. Calls, he eats. If Guru doesn't call, he doesn't eat. Okay, I think I can stop here because the next topic is very big. I think the next time we can cover the rest of this chapter. I think it's okay. Yeah, because that's something which I want to spend a bit more time discussing. It's already 10. The next section is about a brahmachari's conduct, especially his dealings with women. So that's an important topic. And then there are some other things about brahmachari ashrams. All that we'll discuss the next time. So actually, technically, we have only covered the first 5 verses of this chapter, but actually, we have covered much more because we have actually kind of given you an overview of 4 chapters from a broader perspective. What all is there and how all these things fit in. Okay, so just take 2 minutes to summarize. So the whole Varnashram system is a system about, based on your nature, whatever is your nature, you have duties, and if you follow them properly, you will progress towards the goal of life. Your Varna or your occupational duties are based on your guna karma, your nature and your activities, and your ashramas are your four spiritual stages of your life. Four spiritual classes, they are also stages because they go in a particular sequence, and one is expected to follow that sequence for one's life to be progressive. So across one's own life, if one is an Arya, doesn't matter whether one is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha or sannyas, one always knows what is my ultimate goal of life. And towards the end of life, one is expected to come to the point that one is exclusively dedicated as a human being to the ultimate goal of life. So that is why this whole framework is very important to understand. And once we go through this whole system, then we can discuss a little bit more about what it means in terms of uh, us and our practice of this particular system. So I want to pause here and take any questions if there are any.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Yes, Sridharji.
Prabhuji, what is the difference between religious duty and spiritual duty?
So religious duties are duties which are which Krishna defines in the Bhagavad Gita as kula dharma. Correct? He says kula dharma. He talks about kula dharma will be destroyed if the warrior Arjun makes that argument, right? Kula dharma. What is the kula dharma? Kula dharma means you are born in a particular family, not just a varna, but also in a particular family within that varna. And there are inherited duties which are coming, religious duties. I'll give you simple example of duties, right? Uh, Religious duties, performance of specific kinds of sacrifices, yajnas. There may be a tradition to do a particular kind of charity. Whatever is the tradition of following of religious duties for that particular kula, that particular family. Those who are born in that family are expected to inherit and continue. That is known as the kula dharma or jati dharma. When we talk about the dharma of the varna, there are some which are purely occupational in nature. Means Brahman's duties as a priest, that's his occupation. Kshatriya's duties of administration and fighting, those are purely occupational, right? Vaishya's duty of agriculture, cow protection, trading, professional duties, correct? Shudra to render service. But we are talking for each of them, they have different kinds of religious duties. Very simple thing would be Brahmanas are expected to do Sandhya 3 times a day. Sandhya Vandan. And in their own family, some of these families have since generations, every day in their house, they are doing certain homas, certain, worships and celebrations. Then there are certain family deities that people have been worshipping since generations. Some Kula Devatas. So those are also part of the inherited duties of that particular person who's born in that Kula. You get the idea? Spiritual duties are common. Spiritual duties are about achieving perfection, getting liberation from the cycle of birth and death, and attaining pure love for the Supreme Lord. Ideally, religious duties should be performed with a spiritual intention. Then the religious duties become spiritual duties. But not everybody is able to achieve that. So that's why I am separating these two. Ideally, all duties should be done with a spiritual consciousness. When they are done in a nishkama bhav, either done in a nishkama bhav or done with the desire to exclusively please the Supreme Lord, then they become all our spiritual duties, including whether it is performance of occupation, whether it is performance of religious duties, everything becomes spiritualized by that. But for those who are generally still entrapped in the moods and still are fruitive, correct? Like many of us, right? When we are working, we are actually working. How many of us are actually, on the level that we are always thinking of, that our all these activities are being dedicated and directed, please the Supreme Lord. It's not so easy. We speak so many things. Sometimes we speak so many things. After some time, we start believing we are there. Anyway, but you get the idea, Prabhu? What I'm trying to say.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, thank you, Guru.
Hari Hari. Thank you.
Hari.
Yeah. Any other question? Okay, I hope it was useful for this overview. I hope you are not finding that I wasted so much time and didn't discuss so many verses.
It was good,
Silence
Prabhu.
means you're not complaining. Huh?
It is good, Prabhu.
No, Prabhuji, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, good. So because when you have an appreciation of the construct and why, what was the intention and why it has been set up like that, then you will understand why and how it can be mapped to the current situation. If you don't understand the framework and the principles, why, what the principles which govern this setup, then we wouldn't know. Because details can change, implementation can change, but principles cannot change. Please remember this. Principles are eternal. Values are eternal. Details can change. Okay. So the focus of what I was explaining today is so that you understand the underlying principles and values of how that system has been set up. The same principles and values we have to then come and try to see and fit in a Kali Yuga setup, an urban setup. What can I do so that these principles that we just discussed and I summarized are still true? Even though I may not be taking a bowl and going door to door begging Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi. Even though I may not be wearing deer skin. Because we are not talking about, asking our children now to start wearing deer skin. That's not the idea. We are giving you an example of what the setup was in those days. So you understand how that construct was, what was the practice, what is the ideal practice in an ideal community which is already established on Varnashram. Today, the system of Varnashram is practically absent. Everybody is confused. Most people until the end of their life are scratching their head and wondering, am I a Brahman or am I a Kshatriya, am I a Vaishya, Shudra? Forget about performing duties. If at the time of death also you go and ask them, have you figured out? Many of them haven't even yet figured out. Okay, and that's the reality. And one of the reasons for that reality is that there is so much Varna Sankar in Kali Yuga. Apart from very few lines where that Varna has been preserved in the family line, most of the Varnas are all mixed up because so much intermarriage. You don't know. We discussed about the mixed caste. You don't know what is the. Huh? Correct? When you breed a tiger with a lion, you get a liger. Neither a tiger nor a lion. You don't know what combo will come out. So Kali Yuga is a massive mess. So anyway, but at least if we understand the principle, doesn't matter whether we are lion, tiger, liger, or whatever. We know that the principle is to understand our nature, perform activities according to our nature, focus on performing the activities in a detached way, and work towards renouncing the fruits and ideally dedicating the fruits to the Lord. We know that we have to be progressive towards the real goal of life, even though my nature may be a Shudra. Doesn't mean I have to stop my endeavor towards perfection. I should still do my duties as a Shudra, but still follow these principles. I can still simply chant the holy name, take prasad, offer my respects. Very simple. Arjuna man mana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Spiritual duties. That is common for all, right? Did Krishna say this is only for Brahmana? No. Man mana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Offer, become my devotee. Offer your mind to me. Always think of me. Madhyaji, worship me. Mam namaskuru. Namaskuru is not just about folding hand, but it's about accepting the Lord as one's master and being humble in front of the Lord. Then one will continue to make progress no matter what background one comes from. At least one is progressive. That is an Aryan civilization. So sometimes some people get very excited. Oh, sometimes devotees are a bit inclined towards Hindutva and, modern, whatever is happening in the India's political sphere. So the reason devotees take interest in this is because at least if the culture of the basis of Sanatan Dharma, which is Varnashram, when I say Sanatan Dharma, I'm not talking about the eternal principle, I'm talking about the whole tradition. I'm using this term right now. At least that gets set up, then people are at least progressive. And that is important for a smooth ride back home, back to Godhead. Because if it doesn't even have the system in place, it's going to be a very bumpy ride. Varnashram is meant to give a smooth ride within life. Because a Kshatriya will be happy if he lives his life as a Kshatriya. A Brahmana will be happy if he lives his life as a Brahman. And same for a Vaishya, same for a Shudra. A Shudra will not be happy if he tries to act like a Brahman. Nor will a Brahman be happy if he tries to act like a Vaishya. So these are eternal principles which are important for everyone to understand. Okay. Thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Shri Prabhupada. I'll see you all on Tuesday evening. Krishna willing. Thank you. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Hari Hari. Jai Ho.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bhaskar. Hare Krishna. How are you?
Hare Krishna. Good Prabhu. How are you, brother?